but do you know what's actually in your food? Decoding labels can be downright confusing. Here with the lowdown on package promises and how to really understand what you're eating, nutritionist Peggy Kotsopoulos. Come in here. How are you, hon? This is such a tough one.
It is.
It is so confusing, and we keep hearing different things about what we need to be looking for. So we hear time and again, read the label.
Yes.
What are we looking for on the label?
Yeah, and I'm going to explain all of that to you, but I want to start with the most important thing you should be looking at on your label is the ingredients list, because that tells you everything. Rule of thumb is if you can't read it, don't eat it. Right? I mean, there's sometimes they have a laundry list of things and you don't know what half of them are. And something as simple as peanut butter, for example, that I want to use as an example. The only ingredients that should be in there are peanuts.
Right.
Right? Like, that's all you should look for. So there are brands that you go there and you look at the ingredients and it says peanuts. Then there are ones that say light, low fat. Well, peanuts have fat in it. In fact, and I'm going to talk about this, but fat is actually, some fat is actually good for you. So once you start taking out stuff and modifying a food, that's when it starts getting sketchy and you kind of want to avoid those. So then they start adding a whole bunch of other ingredients. So as natural as possible, and they always list the ingredients of descending orders by weight. So in terms of, so whatever's the most in there is the #1 ingredient, and whatever's the least amount is the least ingredient.
Okay.
So you want to make sure you read it by weight. Like, I mean, you read it from like what's the most abundant to the least abundant. So ingredients are the most important things.
So when you start seeing those scientific, really long words that you do not, they have X's and V's in it?
Yeah, so you want to kind of, I mean,
you want that at the bottom of the list?
Like, what does this mean?
Yes.
Yeah, so you want to have, and it should be, like, if there's something like rice, for example, it should be rice. Or, I mean, wheat, or whatever it is, it should be up in the front. If it's way at the bottom, you want to avoid that. So whatever you're looking for should be right at the front, and all the little stuff should be at the bottom. Things like sugar and stuff as well.
Let's look at the nutritional panel now, and you can start to decode what we need to be pulling out of it, starting with serving size. Does that count?
So serving size, yeah, so this is where it gets important when you're comparing products. So if you're looking at two things, so here we have two different green juices. And now when you're looking at the serving size, like sometimes, you know, one might have, let's say it's like 50 calories, and one might say 200 calories. But the serving sizes are very different, so you want to compare. So you have to do math. Like a lot of times when you look at this, you look at the little calculator on your phone and actually do math to actually compare them. And the same thing goes with daily values. Like a lot of times they list those as well. It's not as important, I think, because that's based on a 200-calorie serving. One person might need only 1,500 calories. One person might need 3,000 calories. So that's just as a reference. So when you look at the serving size, you want to make sure that they're equal when you're comparing two different products. And then if you are going to look at the values, you want to make sure it's actually comparable. And the same thing goes with calories. When you're looking at, a lot of times, beverages, it can be a 20-ounce serving, but it has 2 servings in there. And so you can drink the whole bottle thinking, oh, I only had 100 calories, but meanwhile, you actually had 200 calories.
That's right.
Yeah,
so we're used to the math because we're always trying to get the best deal. I think we're all really good at calculating, though. Now use that same math. And tell your kids, this is why you do math homework, guys.
Yeah.
So that when you go to the store, you know exactly the amount of sugar and the serving sizes that you're getting, because you have to compare them. They're all sort of labeled a little bit differently, right?
Exactly.
The serving sizes will be differently. Daily values, interesting. I had never really understood them, and I think it's really kind of good to hear that we don't necessarily have to put that much weight on them. Let's talk about calories.
Yeah, so I always say, don't count calories, make your calories count.
Yes.
So this is where the ingredients come in. Like, you cannot compare the amount of calories in a cookie compared to the amount of calories in a handful of almonds. Like, there's no comparison. They might be the same, but they're empty calories versus like wholesome calories that your bodies are going to use. So don't pay so much attention to the calories. Again, like, be mindful in terms of serving size, how much you're actually consuming, but I wouldn't put too much weight into your calories. It's ingredients and then the other stuff that we're going to get into as well.
That sounds good. Total fat. We're a little bit obsessed with fat. So what are we looking at specifically with the fat? Are there certain kinds we should be more aware of?
Yeah, so when you look at, so we have our standard little label here. And so when fat is actually broken out into saturated fat and trans fat, those have to be shown on a label. So saturated fat typically comes from animal products like dairy, and trans fat is the worst fat you should have. So anything that any partially hydrogenated vegetable oil is a trans fat. But in North America right now, they're actually banning trans fat from packaged foods, so they're really eliminating it. So that should always be Z0. But again, you're looking at fats, look for whole food ingredients. So things like, if you're looking at, like, for example, we are comparing cookies to like a whole food bar here. And so what we have, this is made out of almond butter and almond. So it is going to have 15 grams of fat. If you look at the label, you're thinking, oh my gosh, that's so much for a bar. But it's good quality fats. Where the cookies, 2 cookies or 4 cookies will give you the same amount of fat, but you can't compare because those are, saturated fats. There's a lot of sugars in there. It's unhealthy. I want to stick to foods that are as clean. Minimal ingredients. Make sure you know what is inside your food.
Peggy, that's so good. Thank you for that information. I love it.